We're just recording this video here so that we can share it with all of our friends and let them know what we did and what we saw. Have a little bit of a slideshow to show you. And also just to let you know that if you ever want to do this trip in the future, what we saw, where we went, and what kind of things you can expect as you drive here. And I call this Epic Adventure 2 because I've done this once before, but not quite the same route. But the route that we took, before you start, you have to get gas for your car, so that's where I started. My hometown getting gas. Anyways.
And not the same route, and also not the same company.
Right. Yeah, so I had a different friend last time who went with me, and we actually just went up Highway 1 all through California, and then crossed over once we got to Oregon to Highway 5, and then went up to Seattle. This time we stayed along the coast all the way through Oregon. Then we cut across to see the Columbia River Gorge and then went up to Seattle. Wanted to see this Columbia River Gorge more than the coast in Washington, which my understanding, and I haven't done it yet, but maybe one of these days in the future, is there's not much to see because the road's not near the ocean. So I started by picking up my good friend Glenn here at the hotel in San Francisco. And then, of course, the first place we had to stop along the way was the Golden Gate Bridge. And here's Glenn and me. This one's Glenn at the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a foggy day.
I can see you, Don. Oh, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, my friend Glenn here, who's joining us in this conversation, is in Australia, so there's a little bit of a delay, but we'll get through it. So anyways, we stopped here, and if you do stop ever along the way, you're going to find out, and if you look out to the bay, you can see Alcatraz, you're going to see that it's going to be foggy. Even in the summertime, it's foggy in the morning. By noontime, usually the fog is gone, and then it's a beautiful day. But in the morning, it's almost always foggy. And so, unfortunately, when we started, we got a little bit of fog. And even as we went up the coast, we still had fog for a while. This is called Muir Outlook. We tried to go to Muir Woods, but it was crowded. So, and we couldn't find any parking, and we looked and looked and looked. And finally, we were like 3 miles away. And we finally found parking. We said 3 miles, forget that.
I think, sorry, Don. I think from my perspective, like you said, you picked me up in the morning, and one of the things I'd done is I was wearing sort of a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and I'd gone out and got a cup of coffee, and then I'd sort of waited for you to come. And the thing that sort of struck me most, leaving San Francisco, was the fact that we almost moved into a sort of different weather pattern. Like San Francisco was fairly mild. It was a bit chilly, but the sun was out. It was looking like a nice day. And then as we sort of drove out towards the bridge and stuff like that, we seemed to be driving into almost a different climate.
Right.
And I think these photographs actually show that off quite nicely. That we sort of went from this happy, pretty day in the city to a completely different coastal weather pattern with the fog and the wind and that kind of thing. It was really interesting. I found that initially very interesting.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing because, and I probably should have put a picture in here, because when most people think of the coast in California, and I don't know what your impressions were, Glenn, when you first came here, they think of the beaches of Southern California where it's like Malibu Beach or something like that, where there's all these houses along beautiful sandy beaches where everybody's surfing and can get into the water. But as you can see, as you drive along the coast in Northern California, it's actually quite rocky. There's cliffs. It's difficult to get out there for swimming. And then you have a lot of hazards like rocks throughout the whole rest of the western coast. So it's not always the same as everybody thinks it is when you go to LA or whatever. In this picture, yeah, go ahead.
In my head, I kind of thought it would be a lot like the beaches you described, but I also had done a bit of reading beforehand, so I sort of got what I expected, but I did expect to see more sand, more white sand. So yeah, it was a surprising scenario right up front.
Yeah, and you'll notice in Northern California, north of San Francisco, there's a lot of parks along the coast, so there, you won't see as many houses and stuff. You'll see ranches and farms, but you won't see a lot of just houses just along the coast like you would in Southern California. We drove up a little bit further up the coast, and then you can see in this next picture that the fog is starting to burn away. Especially in this picture with my Jeep here, you can see the fog is still a little bit over the land and a little bit over the ocean, but it was starting to go away. And where we were at this place, which I forget the name of it, was just north of there. I think it was just north of Point Reyes National Park. And it started to become a very beautiful day. Blue sky, sunny weather. We saw all kinds of animals and birds flying around as we drove up the coast.
Yep.
And then the first place that we really stopped to get out and look at everything, and if you ever go on this trip, I'd highly recommend this, is in Jenner, there's a place called Goat Rock, and it's a little place where you can get out, and actually you'll see sea lions and sea otters and all kinds of birds and stuff out here. And in this picture, in the background, you see this river that's coming through here on the right-hand side. This is the Russian River, and across the Russian River on the other side is the town of Jenner. And this is Goat Rock Beach that we're standing on, and you see Glenn's head over there on the right-hand side. But after
that's a very pretty head.
Shiny too. And
it's because the fog had lifted.
And you'll see all kinds of people out on this beach. We saw all kinds of people. There were people out there flying kites, and basically, just enjoying the beach and the sand. And we always, as Glenn and I were driving, we were always talking about different places that you could go to do like paddleboarding and stuff like that. The Russian River in this area is really calm, so it's not like the ocean where it's going to be really choppy and all that kind of stuff. So if you wanted to do something like that or kayak, this is a great place for doing it. And if you're doing that, you can get really close to the wildlife out there. And these are all the sea lions that we had seen out there, and there was just a ton of them. They're all out there sunbathing and enjoying themselves and stuff. And we
also the history. I think the history was pretty interesting. I know I only sort of got a little bit of history from you on the sort of old Russian fur trade,
right,
and how these little settlements came to actually be. But I think it's really interesting, and from a sort of outsider perspective, from my perspective, one of the things that I thought was really mind-blowing initially was coming out of San Francisco is all this sort of fortified installations that were there, obviously to protect the coast, which I'd never even thought of. And then the other part was the fact that another thing from an outsider perspective is we don't even believe or think that once upon a time there were traders who traded fur from other countries in the USA and things like that. So these were all sort of little things that sort of went into, were being installed into my head and were kind of mind-blowing for me, because it's just not something from a visitor perspective that you'd be thinking about. Like every time I go to the United States, it's, hamburgers and football. I don't sort of think about the fact that you once upon a time protected your borders, that traders traveled across the ocean and, traded fur or settled in America to trade fur and things like that, So, yeah, I found, besides the seals and the river and the beauty, just historically, it's a really, really interesting part of the world.
Yeah, and what Glenn was talking about there is, if you're not familiar with it, I took him first to the Marin Headlands, and we went out to the Nike missile site and showed him all the turrets that were out there. And obviously where Muir Outlook is, there's also a little turret area there. These were all installations that were put in across prior to World War I, or prior to World War II. Some of them do date back to the Civil War, like Alcatraz and Fort Point, but the rest of them pretty much were put there to protect the coast from the Japanese, and so they're all along the coast. A lot of them are dilapidated, sealed off, and stuff like that. They don't want you to get into them because they're dangerous and stuff like that, but you get to see that. And yes, the Russian River here, named after the Russian fur traders that came down here. And if you notice, if you look at a map of all the missions that the Spaniards had settled across California, they end right about the Bay Area. And further north than that, then they had to contend with Russians who were coming down to do fur trade. This picture here is of the Goat Rock, looking back towards Goat Rock from on top of that water break we saw. And this is where the river actually meets the ocean, and this is where all the sea lions and sea otters and all that stuff and seals, you're going to see them all in this area. So obviously, if this is their area where they're hanging out, there's probably sharks in these waters right out there. But they were... They were cute little guys. They're out there. A couple of them were playing in the water and stuff like that. Most of them were just sunbathing. And I don't recall that we saw any males or any fighting or anything like that here. When we get to Oregon, we saw some of that, and they were really noisy.
Yeah.
These guys were really quiet.
Yeah, they were just kicking back, these guys.
Yeah, and of course, as you can see here in this picture, you see all the rocks that are out, and this is indicative of the coast going all the way north. You're going to see these large rocks that just stick out, and they're close to shore, but they're not too close to shore. This is an interesting thing because if you think about this, when the Spaniards came here, Sir Francis Drake, the Russian fur traders, and everybody else, they would have to navigate, but they couldn't be too close to the coast because you don't know what's underneath that water right there. And if you come in with a wooden vessel, that's why it was very important that they understood and how dangerous it would have been for the explorers going along this coast. This is where we stopped for lunch. Now, the first time I came up here, there was this great barbecue place that I found in Gualala. I think that's how you say Gualala. It's the next town up. And I couldn't find it, so we finally just said, let's stop and have lunch. So we stopped at this place called the Sea Ranch. This was our view as we had lunch, and I think I had fish and chips. I think I had fish and chips.
I think I did too, yeah.
So anyways, it's a beautiful view. We were in a sun patio or something like that. It was just all glass and stuff like that. So it was a little warm, but it wasn't too warm because it was still cool outside. And then they had this bizarre statue that I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but it was kind of neat looking, so I took a picture of it. So then we drove up along the coast for a little bit longer, and then there is a part of what's called the Lost Coast, or part of the coast that the Highway 1 does not follow along the coast. And there's the King National land out here towards the coast on right above where it says Liggett, the green area. That area is really steep, and so they didn't want to put the highway in that area, so they went inland. And so from here on in, we drive inland. And the first place we stop is a little town called Leggett. And in Leggett, they have a tree that you can drive through, and that was the first place that we went to in Leggett. And this was probably our first experience, because we didn't really get into Muir Woods. This would have been our first experience of seeing the Redwoods. And
which are mind-blowing.
Yeah. I think a lot of...
I mean...
Go ahead.
You kind of think trees, but these aren't trees. These are... they just... It's mind-blowing. I think that for a lot of people, if you've never seen a redwood, like me, I probably had seen them somewhere, but the up close and personal with the redwood is a whole other experience. I just thought, in terms of size and age and story and structure and just how regal and amazing they look, it was, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, I have a bunch of pictures here to continue to show as we go through it. This place, there's 3 different places that you can go along the road in the Redwoods where you can drive your car through, at least 3 that I know of. And this is the furthest south that I'm aware of. And this tree, you can drive through it, and the tree's still alive and it's still growing. That's the very interesting thing for it. You can have a hole through it, and you can still grows. And they have extensive root systems. So here's my car. I got out. You notice that I turned the mirrors in. If you had a car bigger than my Jeep, I would probably not drive it through there. The guy behind us, I think he was like in an Escalade or something like that. No, maybe a Ford Explorer or something like that. And it was really tight. And you could see in the tree, you see all these places where everybody obviously broke their mirrors because they didn't turn them in. But I had room and I got through there. It just didn't feel like I had room. But anyways, it's one of the things you can see. Here I am standing with it. So they say the age of this tree, this tree's height is 315 feet. It's 21 feet in diameter across, and its maximum age is 2,400 years old. So that gets into the BC era, right? You know, this is when Alexander the Great would have been around. You know, this was a sapling. So when you look at these trees, they're some of the oldest living things on Earth. I think the oldest tree is in the Sierras, and it's not a redwood. It's some other type of tree, and it's the oldest known one. But the interesting thing about the redwoods, and here's Glenn standing by the same place. Oh, it was a Chevy. There's the car that came in behind us was a Chevy. Anyways, he was really close when he went through there. And you can see on this picture at Glenn's waist height, looking down the little tunnel in the tree, you can see where all the scrapes are from where people's mirrors have hit.
Yeah.
Interesting thing with the redwoods, the coastal redwoods in California only exist from just north of Santa Barbara, and they go all the way up to Oregon. And that's the only place that they live. They used to cover the whole entire North American continent, but this is only where they are today. And these type of redwoods, the coastal redwoods, are the tallest trees in the world. And they get up to, I think the tallest is 380 some feet high or something like that. There's Sierra redwoods that are in the Sierra Nevadas, and they're wider, not taller. So they're shorter and stubbier, but they get a lot wider than the coastal redwoods. And there's one other type of redwood, and that's in Asia, in China and Japan, and they're not as tall or as wide as the ones here in America. This is a tree that fell over, and some nice lady took my camera and took pictures for us. And it's all hollowed out, and you can almost live in the thing. I mean, it was big enough that you could lay inside of this thing and be covered from the elements, but a really big tree that fell down and that he's put in there. But
you can kind of also see how back in the day, many years ago, if you sort of one of these guys fell over, how you could almost construct a canoe or a decent sized dinghy or boat. You know, you've essentially got the framework right there.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, through the years, how these guys would have been used and put to work, you know, in their various many forms before we started to protect them and things, would have been very interesting.
Next place that we came along, so as we drove up here from where it says Underwood is where Liggett is, but if we went up here, and in this next green section here is Avenue of the Giants, and it's Humboldt State Park. It's a state park, not a national park. The national park, Redwood National Park, is further north up here where it says Oric. That's the area. To get from San Francisco, what time did I pick you up? Was it around 9:30, 10 o'clock, somewhere around that time?
Yeah, it was 9 a.m., I think, was the time. But yeah. So
we got to Leggett in the starting to get close to evening, and by the time that we got to the Redwoods, it was around dinner time in the Avenue of the Giants, which is the second set of redwoods that we got into. Now, this whole entire area, all the way up from this point forward, all the way through Oregon, is all pine forest and beaches. I mean, all the way north from here. So when we get here to Avenue of the Giants, there's a lot of little places where you can just pull off and look at different groves of redwoods. And we stopped off as soon as we had the ability to stop off at one, and you can see some of the redwoods here, and you can see how massive they are next to my car and Glenn. And then we got a couple pictures here. This is Glenn in his new house. This is what happens with redwoods is they typically will live through a fire because the branches that are so high up in the air that the fire doesn't ever reach them. However, the bottoms of the trees can get burnt out. And sometimes you end up with this little burnt out area, and some people will cut it out, and then you can actually go up and inside of this thing as Glenn is here. But you can see all the charring. And so the redwoods, they can live for 2,000 years, even if there's been a lot of forest fires, because they typically, the undergrowth will all burn away, and then the trees will live a little bit longer. And then this next picture, this is Glenn hugging a tree. And you can see that he cannot quite get his arms around it. But he tried.
Yeah, I think that if you read more about the redwoods, it's almost the perfect tree, right? The fact that it it is disease free, it doesn't burn, and lasts forever. So in terms of wood, in terms of a tree, it's like the perfect tree if you think about it.
Well, that's why they've got logs so much, is because people liked redwood because it was harder to catch on fire. It was a great building material. It's probably one of the best woods to use for building material. Hence the problem, people used to go through here and clear cut all of California, taking out all the redwood trees. And unfortunately, that means all the old ones, the ones that are thousands of years old or whatever, a lot of those, you take down one tree and you can build 20 houses with it. Well, unfortunately, loggers made a lot of money, and so you have what's called old growth and young growth. And old growth is still the old trees that have been here for thousands of years that never got logged. And then you have areas that got logged, and then they replanted redwood trees, and then we call that new growth. So the new growth trees aren't usually that big; they're not that old, and those areas of forest are not as impressive as the old growth. And so areas like this, Avenue of the Giants, has a lot of old growth in it, and we saw them. And unfortunately, they don't last forever, and this is an example of one that fell. And it looks like it probably fell from, it either died or lightning strike or something happened. But this tree, if I was standing next to it, it would be over my head. This broken part of the wood over here on the left-hand side of the screen. I want to say it was as tall as my head when I walked through it. So that's how large this tree is that we're looking at here. Got some great pictures of the sunlight coming through and just the beautiful. It's getting late in the day, so the sun's starting to go down, and so you get these streams of light coming through and illuminating the forest floor. Here's Glenn contemplating the redwoods. I'm inside of a stump that we're going to show you the next picture. Glenn got up on top of this stump that I'm inside of here. There's actually a little bird in there that was flying around. Apparently made its nest in there. And this picture is Glenn on top of that stump. Now you see how large he is. How tall are you? What, 6 foot almost, or?
Yeah, I'm just 6 feet.
So this is 6 foot Glenn sitting on top of this stump that it's a fallen over tree, and you see the area underneath it that's kind of hollowed out. That's where I was. You can see that it's taller than the 6 feet that he is in there. I'm 6'3". I was able to stand up, and there was no problem with me hitting my head or anything like this. And you can see him standing on top of it. He got some pictures of me standing on them as well too, and you can see that it's quite impressive, just the size of the trees and stuff that we were there. As we headed out to the coast, we left Avenue of the Giants. It was starting to get a little late, and some of the last groves that we stopped at, the sun was starting to set. So if you're thinking about doing a travel thing, if you're leaving San Francisco at 9 o'clock and you're following straight along the coast, you're probably going to get to Eureka sometime that night. It takes a while to go down Highway 1 just because it's windy and back and forth road, and you can't pass. If there's RVs or slow cars, you just have to deal with it. Along the way, we got this wonderful sunset that we stopped and took a picture of. And then we made it to Eureka, and that night we got the last hotel room left, and it's a funny story. The lady in front of us got the second to last one left, and we get there, and I'm sure that we would have found another place, maybe at another hotel in Eureka. This is the place I stopped at the last trip that I went through, so I kind of knew it. And there's a restaurant right there, and we hadn't ate dinner yet, so we figured we were going to go there. So we go into there and we say, hey, we want a room, and the lady says, we only have one room left, and it's a king-size bed, and that's it. So there's no two beds, and we're like, oh, well, it's better than sleeping, nowhere else or in the car. So we said, fine, we'll take it. And I asked if they had a hot tub with the pool, and she said, no, we don't have a hot tub, but we have one in the room. And I thought, and I'm thinking, it's one of those bathtubs that has little bubbles or whatever in it. So I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I wasn't worried about it. So we get up into this room, me and Glenn, and we look in there, and in the room, literally in the room with the bed, right next to the bed, is this bathtub with jets. If Glenn would have fallen out of bed at night, he could have fallen into the tub. So we were.
It would have been perfect if we were on honeymoon or something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's what it seemed like. It was like a honeymoon suite. But anyways, sometimes it may be a little bit better to plan in advance. We did no planning in advance. We sort of knew where I wanted to go, and I knew places along the way to stop and see, but we had no plans on where we were going to stay because I was trying to play it by ear. I figured, maybe we stay all day in Avenue of the Giants and stay the night there or something like that. So I didn't want to, and I didn't want to have to rush and leave things out because we didn't get to a certain point by a certain time. So unfortunately, if you get in too late, hotels, usually by 9 o'clock they're starting to get scarce for rooms, so you want to get there before them. So the next morning we get up and start off.
I think the other thing to touch on, Don, is just in terms of how many days you should probably also sort of put aside to do something like this. It's not the kind of thing you can do in sort of 1 or 2 days. It has to be the kind of number that we used, or obviously more.
Yeah, I mean, we took 3 days? We had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? Or was it?
Oh no, we left on the Wednesday morning. Wednesday,
Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday, half a day.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be like we could have. There's a lot more that we could have done.
Sure, we could have easily doubled that.
Yeah. There's so many things to see, and so if you're ever up there. Next place we stopped was Prairie Creek Redwood State Park, which is right north of Redwood National Park, and they're right next to each other. And we were looking for elk, right? So we went into this place, and we were looking for elk, and we couldn't find any. And to get to this location where I have this picture here, you have to drive down this dirt road, and you have to drive through a creek. And I think I have video of it. Maybe I'll find that video and splice it in here and show you what the road was like. It was really kind of surreal because as you drive down this dirt road, you're in the bottom of the forest, and it's very dark, even though it's kind of light outside. And there's dust all over all the ferns that are covering the sides of the hills and all that stuff. So it's kind of surreal as you drive out there. So we drive out here to this beach, and then we go onto this road that you have to drive through a creek and all this stuff to get out to the end of it. And we're probably 2 to 3 miles down the side of the beach. And there's just a sheer cliff face, and then there's a couple of trees, and then there's the beach. We didn't know what we were going to go and see. We were just going to go see where this trail led. We didn't know what it was. And here's Glenn. He's fearlessly going off to see what's out there. And this is on the beach side of the parking spot that we were at. And as soon as we come around the corner, we see these people just standing there. And we're like, why are these people standing there? And as soon as we come around the corner, we find the elk that we've been looking for. And we ran across these 2 bucks, and they're just huge. And they're out here right along the beach, just grazing in the grass. And you can see from this picture here, huge antlers, and they're very large. And this guy up in the front, he's a smaller one than the one in the back, and you can see his antlers, how huge those are. And we got, I mean, State Park will tell you to keep your distance away from them. We weren't too close. I had a telephoto lens, so I was able to really zoom in on them. We were probably 30, 40, 50 feet maybe away, I guess. I don't know. How many meters would you say?
Yeah, that sort of number, 25, about sort of 20, 25 meters away. I was surprised at how mellow they were. I mean, they were obviously aware of us, but they never sort of turned to, they never turned to us aggressively. They obviously kept, their heads kept bobbing up just to sort of make sure that everybody was keeping their distance and stuff. But there didn't seem to be any aggression. They seemed really comfortable grazing. But yeah, they were, in terms of size, it's hard to capture in the photograph, but it's almost like someone needs to stand next to them. But yeah, in terms of size, I was another thing from an Australian perspective. We don't have any elk, so we don't really have a lot of buck or deer. So to see this kind of thing that resembles a horse with massive horns, and to see the actual size, and because I was constantly envisioning, imagine being sort of charged by that thing, or imagine being taken out by it, kind of thing. And yeah, it was just, once again, just constantly, for me, it was just a lot of the stuff that I saw was just, I know I'm overusing the word mind-blowing, but that's ultimately what it was. I was kind of like, wow, how big are these trees? How big are these buck? How big, how big are these rocks? How big are these rivers? How big? That's how it was for me a lot of the time. How big is this bridge, kind of thing?
Well, the interesting thing about these are called Roosevelt elk, and the Roosevelt elk were hunted almost to extinction. There was like a couple hundred left, and through preservation and illegal hunt, or making hunting illegal and all that kind of stuff, they were able to bring it back up to the thousands now. Roosevelt elk, and they're in the state parks and the park areas, and you can't hunt them because they're an endangered species. There's a different type of smaller elk that's further south. If you get into like Point Reyes, they have a different type of elk that's kind of a descendant of this type of elk. They're typically smaller in that area, but basically come from the same lineage as these elk up here in Northern California. Then we went out. We went down the road a little bit more, and we went out on the beach again in another place. And you can see my Jeep is starting to get dirty, and that became a thing at this point in time. Once we drove through the stream, it was like, well, we need to get the thing as dirty as possible. So it looks like we've done a lot of off-road travel. And in this picture you see the cliff that's just on the side of this. So the forest is over here on the top of this cliff, and then we're down here in the trees that go out here, and then to the right of this is the beach. And there's a lot of tsunami warning signs. If there's a tsunami going, there's no place for you to go. If there's a tsunami, you're going to get it. Here's a picture of the beach. Again, this was early morning, so you can see the fog, and the fog starting to dissipate. This particular beach and where we were, this road is just north of Oric, California, and it's near the entrance to the road that gets all the way out here is, I think it's called Davidson Road. I think that's what it's called. And it was in the Elk Meadows. And the first thing that we said was, when we went to the Elk Meadows, this is where we're going to find the elk, and there weren't any elk. The funniest thing happened is the first trip that I went up here, just before we got to your Oric, and you turn away from the coast and go in towards Oric, right on the right-hand side, there was like 50 of them. Me and my other buddy, that's where we saw them. So I was hoping that we'd see them in this area, and we only saw these two, but we were able to get pretty close to them, and I wouldn't get any closer than we got to them because they can be territorial, and you don't want to have to call the forest ranger because you were too close to them. And so here's Glenn taking a picture of me, taking a picture of him. But with the cliffs in the background, as you can see, there's not a whole lot of place to go from the beach. And this beach was actually kind of crowded. Despite the fact that you had to go down this long, windy road, the campgrounds that are there were sold out. So if you wanted to camp on the beach, I don't know what the process is. You'd have to check with the park to find out what it is. But there certainly is a number of campsites. If you didn't want to at all stay in a hotel, there's enough campgrounds along the coast that you would find a bunch of stuff. And then we drove into the Redwood Forest and the National Park. And so we pulled over, and this is called the Big Daddy tree or something along those lines. It's right off the right-hand side. If you're going north, you pull off. There's a scenic route that you take to go through the Redwoods National Park. This is a very beautiful area. I stopped at this same tree on my first trip, so I kind of knew where it was, and I kind of found it again. It's a trail that you park in a parking lot, and you take a little trail, and then you're here. Then there's another trail that you'll take a little bit further, and I'll show you. It's called the Cathedral Trail, I believe. Or it says the Cathedral Redwoods or something along those lines, and it'll be to the right. And here's me underneath the tree, and you can see how massive these trees are. This one's supposed to be, or maybe it's called Old Daddy. It's one of the oldest ones. They're very large. And this is what's around it. This tree with all this eerie green moss on it, and it's just, and all the ferns on the bottom, and then these just bright green leaves from the light coming through it. You get all the different colors of green in it, and it's kind of cool. I bet in the wintertime all the moss and all that stuff's kind of creepy looking, or at nighttime maybe. I don't know.
It's kind of a bit Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah, I would say much so. And so we took the trail just a little bit up there to get to where this tree was that had fallen over, that I have taken a picture with other people before. This one we found, it had fallen over, and everybody climbs to the top of it, and so Glenn climbed to the top of it, and we took a picture of him climbing up it. And the perspective doesn't really do it justice. He's kind of up there a ways. Then we walked down the trail a little bit further, and it's probably a quarter mile, not even that. Less than a quarter mile. You come around the corner going towards the Cathedral Trail or whatever it's called. And a cathedral, by the way, is when an old redwood dies, and the root system makes a ring of trees around where the old tree used to be, and they start growing up. And then you have a hole in the center, and then they call that a cathedral. Anyways, so we're taking that trail. We come to here, and this is a tree that had fallen over. The interesting thing about this redwood tree that had fallen over, and we're standing in the roots here, basically, is other trees are actually growing up off of it. Other trees are using the redwood to grow from it. And so you see where I'm standing on this thing, and you see these... they look like roots and all this stuff, or branches. These are branches from another tree that's sitting on top of this that's growing up from there. So it's a bizarre...
I think there's one just above my left shoulder as well.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of just to the right of my left shoulder.
Right.
There's a tree that's sprouted out of the side of the root system there.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting thing, because there's this huge tree that's fallen over, and the forest just recovers it, right? So the other trees just use it for themselves, you know. Here's a couple more pictures down the trail as we walk down the trail. I thought the picture over here on the left, I thought was really cool, because you see the trail kind of winding through there, and then you see all the trees and all this. All this stuff that you're seeing, all these leaves and stuff, this is stuff like dogwood and other types of trees. The redwoods are well above all of this stuff. They're hundreds of feet above, so you're not really getting the redwoods in this picture here, or the picture on the right. And again, here's that mossy stuff growing all over the smaller trees. So as we drove north of there and getting towards the more north in the park and stuff like that, to the right is a place called Trees of Mystery. I didn't stop there the first time. It does look like it's a tourist trap. It does look like it's a little gimmicky, but I think it was worth the stop. They have this big statue.
I think that...
Go ahead.
One of the things that we did was that cable ride.
Yeah, that's here.
And being able to be whatever it was, sort of 60, 70 meters up in the air, and sort of at the same level as the actual trees, being that sort of 100, 200 feet up. It just gave you that kind of perspective that because you keep looking up. Whenever you're standing in the redwoods, you keep looking up, and you seldom can even see the top. So being able to look down and just kind of understand how high that is was for me kind of the real winner. I know that it is, as you said, a tourist trap, and there's a lot of stuff there that is put in place just to get people to, drop a few dollars and walk around for a bit. But I think, given what we'd seen beforehand, it was really interesting to see the redwoods from the top of the tree down rather than from the bottom of the tree up. Just on this picture that Donald's got up here, Donald tried to talk me into having a picture underneath the bulls, unmentionables.
So this is Paul Bunyan. The funny thing is, if you have kids, the neat thing about it is somebody is watching, and when you get up there to take a picture, then he starts talking to you. And he's actually talking to you, and he's listening to what you're saying, and he responds to you, too. So it's kind of interactive. There's like a real person there. And if you don't know who Paul Bunyan is, it's just an American folk tale or something about a really big guy that was a lumberjack and his big blue ox called Babe. American mythology. So we get into the park, we pay whatever it was to get into the actual park, and then they have all these trees laid out that you can go and see, and they tell you something about the tree. This particular tree here with Glenn in it is called the elephant tree, I guess, and it's just because the roots look like an elephant trunk, and it's and you can see how large the roots are to this tree as well. I think that it must be the spruce type of tree. They grow tall, but not as tall as redwoods, obviously, but 150 to 180 feet tall, so that's a pretty big tree. So the other trees that we saw there, this is a different type of, I guess, pine, and it had all this moss growing on it. And with the light coming through it, I thought, oh, this would be a really good picture. So I got this picture. It's kind of creepy because you're seeing the dark side of the branches. They're kind of like silhouetted, and you see a little bit of the green coming across around the corners of it. That is the moss and the light lighting it up. So I kind of like the way that this picture looked. And actually, I just looked up and I was like, oh, that would be a cool picture. So I snapped the picture, and I think it came out pretty well because it gives you a little bit of an eerie feeling. We went to the next tree, and it looked like I think this one, I always think of this is like the Sarlacc pit, which is in Return of the Jedi, Star Wars, that thing that's in the sand that just eats everything. It just looks like it's going to suck you in or something. But this is another tree that had fallen over, and they're showing you the root system of it and whatever. So after you go through and see all these other goofy-looking trees, then there's this really nice path that goes along the side, and you kind of wind back and forth and see different things. Then they show you this place. This is called their cathedral. And remember what I said earlier about a cathedral where an old redwood died and a bunch of redwoods kind of grew up around it. And so it has like a weird center in it. And some of these can be quite large. I mean, some cathedrals that I've seen have like a 40-foot across. It's just a big, huge circle. Anyways, this is a very small one. And apparently a lot of people have weddings here. It's a very famous place for people to have weddings. So if you're going to go on a trip and you want to take a wedding, this might be a place to do it because it's out with nature and all that stuff. Oh, and I think there were some signs up here that said that because all these trees that are in this area, there's a bunch of them that look kind of weird, like that elephant tree, and there's another tree where it's all it's going sideways and all the branches go up off of one side, and they call it a candelabra or something like that. So the Native Americans, when they were here, they considered this place like haunted, or the spirits were here and they were upset, and that's why all the trees were malformed or misshapen or stuff like this. They have another redwood tree out towards the end, just before you get to riding the cables up. It's called Sky Trail, by the way. That's the name of it. And here's a picture of the gondolas that take you up. Now, we got there, it was before noon, maybe 10 o'clock or 9:30, 10 o'clock, somewhere in that time frame that we got there. The interesting thing is the line was already kind of long when we got there. And by the time we got up here, the line was 3 times the length it was when we got in line. And they can only put 6 people per car in it, and they only have 8 cars or something like that.
Something.
And it takes a while for you to get up to the top, so you're going to be waiting for a while. But like Glenn said, it's totally worth it. And here's a picture of you starting to go up. Now, as you go up, you stop 2 or 3 times, or maybe 4 times as you go up. You just go up halfway and then you stop, and then you're just sitting there for a while, and then it goes and then stops. And it's stopping because at the other end, people have to get off the carts and they have to stop it and all that stuff. But you can see from this picture, we're above the trees. And if you look down, it's like 200 feet down, and it's just like, whoa. And we're going up the hill, and it's fairly steep. I mean, it's super steep. Just like kind of like riding gondolas for skiing, except for these are enclosed. You get to the top.
This kind of felt like when you.
Go ahead.
This felt like when you take off in an aeroplane. That initial, the kind of the ascent seemed that sort of angle where it felt like I was taking off in an aeroplane, and then you would kind of and as you go, that little initial bit, the first sort of 50 or 60 meters, it sort of winds really quickly, and you seem to go pretty quickly, and then you sort of slow down and maybe even stop. So yeah, like you said, it was really interesting because you seem to go shoot up probably, I don't know, 100 feet, and then sort of dangle there for a bit and have the opportunity to just look down and look across the tops of the trees. I thought, that was for me really cool.
Yeah, and I don't know what the name of the hill that they take you up to, but these few pictures here are showing you the view from on top. You're on the top of the mountain. It's one of the tallest peaks there, and so you can look out and see. This is looking away from the ocean back into California on this side, and there's large trees up here. There's some kind of bird's nest was up there. And then looking back towards the ocean, this picture of me in the background, where you see that blue on the just over the trees, that's the ocean. So we're looking back towards the ocean behind me, and where Glenn's head is in this picture, that's the ocean. So from here, you're seeing the beautiful pine forests, you're seeing all the trees, and then you're seeing the ocean in the background. And it's a beautiful place. And again, here's the cart as it comes up to the top and where you get off. And it's kind of gimmicky, all the stuff. They talk about Bigfoot and all that thing. One thing that we did do is we took the trail back down rather than taking the cart down. It was good exercise, but on the trail it warns you should be, it's meant for advanced people. If you have any leg injuries or you're an old person or whatever, I would not take the trail. It is steep. It was fairly steep. I didn't wear any of my hiking boots. I just wore my regular shoes. And if you roll an ankle out there, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So they give you sticks to help you walk down, but I was also trying to carry a camera. My large Nikon D300, so it's kind of a large, bulky thing, and I really can't just put it in my pocket type of thing. Anyway, so that's a good thing. So we kept on driving that day. Our goal was to make it to Coos Bay by the end of the night. So our next place that we stopped was Crescent City. It's probably the last large California city that you're going to get into before you go across into the Oregon border. And Glenn took this picture of me, and the rock's in focus, but I'm not. But I kept it because I thought it would still look kind of cool. You don't want to see my face anyway, so it's probably good that I'm blurry. So this is the lighthouse out there. And as you can see, and here's a picture with Glenn, as you can see, the road goes right into the ocean. So at low tide, you can walk across on dry land, but during high tide, it's kind of covered up. And there's a little park right here, and so we were just checking everything out. Then we saw these girls out here, and they were feeding the squirrels. And I don't have all the pictures here. I probably looked like 20 pictures here. They were feeding these squirrels, and squirrels would just reach up and grab the food right out of their hand and eat it. And then 2 of the squirrels tried to run up the girl's legs like she was a tree, and she started freaking out. And I'm like, well, that's what you get for feeding them. And by the time we got uninterested in them and started walking down the water break, there's probably about 20 squirrels that had come out of all the bushes looking for food. So it was really kind of interesting. And here's this is a big, huge water break. It's a big concrete and rock structure that kind of goes out. So we kind of walked out there, and it said, "Be careful when you're out there." And here's a picture from there, looking back towards the lighthouse. It was a beautiful day. As you can see, there's not a cloud in the sky. It's beautiful blue, sunny. And here's some people in this picture who braved the water to walk across and see the lighthouse. And I wanted to do it, but I was like, I don't want to get all wet. I don't want to get my camera wet. And so I was like, I'm not even going to try that, even though I really did want to see the lighthouse. Now, this is funny because of what happened on Saturday, which we'll get to when we get to that part of it. But the fact that we didn't want to get wet to go across this. Anyways, so this is the water break, and there's some dogs.
And this was a perfectly...
Go ahead.
This was a perfect day with no clouds and sunshine, and we didn't want to get wet.
Yeah. That makes it
but on Saturday, when it was cold and rainy,
so
we'll get to that.
Yeah. So this is a part of the bay, or the little area. This is the harbor, I guess, because the water break kind of makes it into a bay, and there's this, I don't know what it is out there. We just took a picture of it. And Glenn, he is here in the car, and I took a picture of it. It's just like show the Jeep where it was. Now we drive from there north and into Oregon. We cross the Oregon border. The Oregon border is on this map here that you see is right at the bottom of the picture. And then we start looking at, the beaches in Oregon. Well, and I think this one actually might have been in Northern California before we went across the Oregon border. This beach, again, it's another little beach that's there's a bridge kind of going over it. A lot of people stop down here and we're walking around on the beach. I came across this huge turkey vulture that, he was just checking things out and hanging out down there. And then he took off flying, and I tried to get some pictures, but they were all blurry. But even though it was a pretty decent day to take pictures, I just wasn't ready for it. And then we cross into Oregon. Welcome to Oregon. Now, as soon as we get into Oregon, a little bit different. In this picture, and I really like this picture that I took, and you see Glenn here on the right-hand, just kind of right-hand side, just staring out at the ocean and the large rocks and all this kind of stuff. But he's kind of silhouetted from here. I just went as soon as I
that was whale rock, I think.
Oh, was that okay? When we got here, I just thought I was standing back here and I was like, I got to get this picture because this is perfect. Because you see Glenn here looking at this like he's enjoying creation and nature and all this kind of stuff, and he's kind of just back here and silhouetted. So I thought that this would be a good picture, and I'm glad it turned out because it really is kind of a good picture.
It is cool.
And it kind of gives you the impression that I had of the trip, and that was that this just awestruck at, just how beautiful the Oregon coast is, just as beautiful, if not more so than California in some ways. California's beautiful too, but I mean they're slightly different in the way that they're beautiful. This is Pistol River, would be behind me when I'm taking this picture. And it's just another way of looking at the beach. And you can't really make it out here, but you see all these little jutty rocks sticking out on the ocean side. You see this water here, and then you have this beach, and then you have the water again, and you see all these rocks down there that kind of look like teeth sticking out. And those are just big rocks every so many feet or whatever. They almost look like they're equally spaced out, too, just along the coast, and they were really interesting. So, and again, the rest of it was pretty much like this until we got to Coos Bay. And Coos Bay is where we were going to spend the night, and we found a hotel after driving around the town in circles a couple of times. We stayed at like the Red Lion Inn or something like that. And they did have a hot tub, and it wasn't in the room. It was outside. Anyways, so we decided we were going to go down. Coos Bay is a really nice place. If you get a chance to stop there, I would stop there. It's all like boutique restaurants and small artisan type of places in the little town. It's not very large. It's maybe a couple blocks long, but definitely tourist friendly. Clean streets, very nice place to go. We ended up stopping a couple, 2 blocks, I guess, west of the main street we stopped at Seven Devils Brewery, and of course we had some dinner there and had a couple beers. Glenn got a beer and I got the sampler, and I paid a little extra so I could try all of their beers. And we met a very interesting waitress there. It was interesting because we sat outside on the patio, and they had a fire out there, and they had a bunch of tables around it, and there were some people there, and they were engaged in conversation, having a good time. You'd see other people come and sit at a different table, and you knew that they weren't with the other people because they were on their own little thing, but they knew who those people were. So it's got that like small town vibe that you get. Like they're all locals and they all kind of know each other, because they were at the chamber meeting last week or whatever. And so they said something to each other like, oh, how was the chamber meeting or whatever, and then they went back to their group and all this stuff. We got a really interesting waitress when we were checking out or paying for our bill. And she came up to us and she said, oh, you guys aren't from around here. Where are you guys going? And we're like, oh, we're just driving up the coast and we're going to a conference in Seattle. We decided that we were going to make fun of, have a vacation or holiday before we got there. And so she started telling me, oh, I went to and she was a spaz. She was total spaz. She was just like flying around. And she's like, oh, I went to a conference once before. And then she said, at conferences you always drink the night before. And we were like, yeah, we know conferences. She's like, I got so drunk and the next day I was so tired. And you know how you're in the session and they're so boring and all this stuff. She's like, I just slipped underneath the table. And you know how the tables have tree skirts? She's like, I just slipped underneath there so I could take a little nap. And then she says, I woke up a little bit later. I don't know how much time it had passed, but then I woke up and they were having a private meeting in there, so I couldn't get out. I had to stay underneath the table until it was over. And I'm like, you are a spaz. Anyway.
Yeah, she was like the village stoner. she was just going to talk, even if it was all just coming to her from a greater body. And she was just going to say it. Yeah, she was cool though.
Yeah, it definitely made our trip there. I mean, she was the highlight of the night. I forgot her name, but really nice girl, and great stories too. And then as soon as she was done talking, she's like, "Okay, get out of here. I got to go to work." Fun atmosphere. And she wasn't our waitress. We had a different guy as a waiter, and he was a nice guy too. So, there's a couple patrons that talked to us a little bit. Some guy had his dog there, and he was talking to us. So it's a very friendly place, and good beer. I liked the beer. Most of it, there was like one I wasn't too particularly happy with, but everything else I liked. So it's a really good brewery as well. And I'm not getting paid by them to say this. So we spent the night there. Got up the next morning and we got out. We wanted to go out to see the dunes and rent an ATV or get a tour or something of it out by the Oregon dunes. Now there's a place called Spinreel, and that's where we ended up going. And that's their little logo there, Spinreel. It's a great place to go. Again, I'm not endorsing them or anything like that. There's a lot of other places that you can go. This is the one we went to, and we were very happy with what they took us out and showed us. Yeah. And what we ended up doing is rather than rent these ourselves and drive around, if you do, by the way, you need to give yourself a couple hours. You're not just going to go out there, grab one of these and drive out there. They had a safety course and a video you had to watch. You had to look at this map and so that you understood where everything was. And by the time we got out there, I'm telling you, you could get lost. So you end up spending an hour trying to get ready just to go out there, and then you go out there and you got an hour. And then, it just seems like you spend a lot of time preparing and not doing it. So what we did is we just hired the four-wheel drive to drive us out there and give us the grand tour of everything. And so basically it's a big, huge white Jeep that they just drive you out there. And our driver, Justin, he's a local guy, great guy. He's telling us all about the story about how the dunes used to be much larger than they are now. And all these trees that you see here on the right and the left didn't exist a long time ago. It was all dunes. And so this picture probably shows it better. To my right is the ocean in this picture, and all these trees did not exist here 50 years ago. It was all dunes. And even this grass that's out here in front of us was all dunes. And the dunes were going so far inland that they were afraid they was going to go over the highway and keep on going. So they imported this grass, and I think he said it was from Scotland or England or something like that.
Yeah, somewhere in Europe.
Yeah, they imported this grass, And this grass is evasive, and it can't be killed. They do everything. They burn it. They do everything. The roots get down 30 feet. You burn it out here, and it grows back. And it has taken over the whole area. Once it takes over an area, the sand kind of goes away, and then now you have some type of soil or something that other trees can then start growing in. So that's what's ended up happening here. He said he had a guy that had lived there when he was a kid and had been 50 years away. He came back and he was surprised because there used to be no trees between the road and the ocean. It was all just sand dunes. And now there's trees everywhere. So he's taking us down some of the trails to show us, and we're heading out to the beach in this one. It's a little bit of a rough ride. It's deceptively. It's not. There's a lot of bouncing up and down. It's not level or anything like that, so you can't go very fast. And then we got out on the beach, and the beach is just—it's more like that Southern California look of beach. It's just white sand as far as the eye can see. Big, beautiful place. Part of it was closed when we were there. You can't go where the stop sign is, but you can go the other direction. And here's Glenn and I in the Jeep. Justin got out, took a picture of us. And by the way, Justin's a really great guy. He tells us all the stories about the background of all this stuff, and this is where you learn all this stuff. He took us around and showed us stuff. It's normally an hour-long drive that he takes you out. He had to stop and help people twice along the way, so we got a little bit more than an hour out of it. But that was kind of cool because we got more time. And here's the ocean, beautiful blue ocean, white sand beaches. This is a place that if I had time, I would want to camp here and spend all day here. This is a really gorgeous place to go and see. After we get to the beach, we start heading back to part of the dunes.
That was, I mean, the beach was idyllic. Like you could, as you say, you can imagine just pitching a tent and, throwing in a fishing line and sort of barbecuing on the beach and things like that. It was really, it was picture postcard type stuff.
Yeah. He takes us out to this tree here, and the roots are out. And he had a name for it, and I forget what he called it. Anyways, he's taking us up.
Spider tree, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, maybe it was spider tree. Yeah, I don't know if that's an official name or just what Justin calls it or whatever. But yeah, we're gonna go with spider tree. So we're going out in here. And by the way, if you have your own car, you can take it out here, but you have to get an off-road vehicle permit, which requires you to have a shovel or fire extinguisher and other things and whatever. And if you drive out here, he said bald street tires are the best tires to use, and underinflated are the best to use on the sand so you don't get stuck. So we're driving up and down the dunes, and here's a couple pictures of the dunes. And then he takes us out away from the ocean on the side of the dunes, and then we have some fresh water over there, like little lakes and stuff like this. Again, if you want to paddleboard or canoe or kayak or something like this, beautiful places to do it. You can see how beautiful and clear the water is, and very nice day again. You could spend a whole week in this area and probably not exhaust all the activities that you could do in this area. And then he takes us out on the dunes, and he takes us up on top of this really tall dune, and he drives the Jeep right to the edge, and it's like a roller coaster. Like, it's going down, and it just keeps on going down, and you can't see the sand where the end of the car is, right? You can't see it. You don't know how much further. You feel like you're going to end up going straight 90 degrees straight down. And it was freaking me out. I'm like holding on to the dash bar, and I'm just like holding on to it, like, how much further is this going to go? And then he goes
because everything's the same color.
Yeah, it's
deceptive. You can't see depth and things like that.
Yeah, so he came down there and came up on the other one and fishtailed it, and we were going pretty fast. And the first time I did, I was like freaked out. And then I was like, do that again. That was fun. While we were there, I took a panoramic picture with my cell phone, and this is the panoramic picture that we sort of got. This guy he was trying to drive between these trees. There's a little sand part in there, but he fell down into one of the holes on the side. And not here, but in other places in here, there's little things they call witches' eyes, and these witches' eyes are just like little dips, and if you fall into one of these little witch's eyes, which is just an indentation in the sand, you're going to get stuck and you're not going to get out. Hence the name Witch's Eye. But there's also another thing like Devil's Holes or something like he called it. And he said that sometimes there's trees underneath it and they die, and so there becomes a void, and then the sand collapses in, and if you're in one of those, it's like quicksand, you kind of fall into it, and you could get seriously hurt or die. So it's kind of dangerous out there. So we were kind of glad that we didn't rent the vehicles and we just had someone else drive us around who kind of knew what they were doing. So we didn't have to call for help and get stuck. Because, I mean, you get stuck out here and you rented the vehicle for 4 hours and you spend an hour being stuck and then you just wasted all your time. And then here's us at the end when we got back, the Jeep that they took us out. Which, by the way, was a really nice Jeep and really good time. And, yeah, so I'd recommend it. If you're out in that area, this is like a must-do. This is a thing you have to do and check out.
There's also, if you look just behind us, there's an old fellow sitting there that we got talking to, and he was from a motorcycle club that was they were on their way to
Sturgis.
You remember the name? Sturgis, or some big motorcycle rally.
Yeah.
It was actually his friends who ended up in that hole.
Yeah.
And had to be rescued. Where he was hungover and he decided that he wasn't going to go riding on the dunes. He was just going to kick back in the sun.
Yeah, he was from Canada, and he was going to Las Vegas, and then he was going over to Sturgis. So he's making a big old huge loop. And they were coming down the coast here, going to Las Vegas, and then going back to Sturgis. It's a very roundabout way of doing it, but if you're a motorcyclist, you obviously want to be on the open road, and so he's going to go see everything. Yeah, and another interesting person. Another group of people that we ran into was when we saw the elk. There were some, I think it was a German couple, and we told them to come over and to see us, and then we ran into them again when we went to the Trees of Mystery. So
that's right.
It's interesting. Sometimes the first time when I did this with my friend Rob, we ran into the same motorcyclists a couple times along places we had stopped, and then they would stop, and then we would see them. And they were also from Germany, and I think some of them were from Iceland. And what they do is they fly into some place in wherever, like in L.A., rent Harley Davidsons and drive to Seattle or drive around the United States, and that's what they do for a holiday. And it's a big thing that they like to do. And we ran into them a couple times when we were driving on my first attempt at this thing. Next place we came to was the Sea Lion Cave. Justin told us if you go there that it's going to be stinky and cold, so make sure you have a jacket. And it was stinky, that's for sure. So we stopped once along the way, I think just before we got there. But then we got to Sea Lion Caves, and it's a very small little area. There's not much parking on this side. On the right-hand side, going north, there is a bunch of parking, and that's where we ended up parking. And this is as big as the place is. Underneath this parking lot is where the cave is. And you're going to have to go into a elevator to go down. And then it'll open up, 200 feet below us or something like that. You walk out the back side of the building, and then you walk down the side of the cliff here to this building that you see right here, and then you go down. Notice in the background there's a lighthouse on the point out there. We stopped there and saw that house and that lighthouse, and we'll talk about that later. But if you look at the water down there, you notice how dirty it looks. I think part of that is because of these sea lions, and you'll see why here in a minute, because they are stinky. And it's just another shot of the same area, the lift that goes down. Once you get down into it, this is pretty much the cave. You're kind of blocked off, and you can't go any further into the cave. But this is the cave, and here in the middle, towards the bottom, where it's kind of dark, you see this large sea lion, and this is a male. And he's out there making all kinds of noise, doing whatever. And then you see all this rock over here in the background, and there's a bunch of just seals up there. And watching them try to get out of the water and on top of this was kind of funny and hilarious, because they'd get up there and they'd roll back off. So anyways, it was kind of interesting. It's very dark in there, so flash photography is not going to work very well. You sort of just have to do a slow exposure or a slow shutter speed and just hold it steady. to get a good shot. Notice this cave. To the right of this cave opens out underneath where we saw the lift, the elevator, and the entrance is right here to the right. Notice to the left that it goes all the way through and it comes out on the other side. So there's this huge long tunnel that you can go through. Now this, it says, or they claim it is, this is the largest sea cave in in North American continent. This is the largest sea cave, apparently. This cave goes so far back, me and Glenn were just sitting there saying, I wish we could go back there and see what's back there. I don't know how far it goes back. I don't know what's back there. It'd be neat if they just had a trail that went back there or something like that. But it's really kind of neat. It goes all the way through, as you can see. Notice that this next picture, our little sea lion bull guy is gone. He had jumped into the water, and it sounded like rocks were falling in there. It was a big splash. And then he swam away. Now, turning around from here, they go back up, and then you can go back out this little tiny hole. You really can't go out it. All you can do is see out this hole. Now, this used to be the old way, before they had an elevator, this used to be the old way that you get into it. It used to be a wooden structure that was stairs that you'd walk all the way down. I think this place has been there for like 50 years or something like that, they said. You see the lighthouse again off in the distance. Looking up out of this, to the right, this picture on the right here is the rocks that were there, and you see this green moss growing on it, and it was really colorful and neat, so I took a picture of that. And then you also, looking up out of this little tiny hole in the side of the thing, you look up and you see all this, like, flowers and stuff just growing out of the side of the rocks. It was really interesting. And then, of course, they have the little thing where you can put money into it and you can see, but I don't know that it was worth spending any money on that thing to see stuff. But again, here's that beautiful green moss. It was really interesting there. And if you look out, you'd see these birds just nesting up on the side of the hills. And you see all this white stuff coming down the side of the hills. This is all the bird poop from their little nesting and all this kind of stuff. I don't know what kind of birds these are, but whatever they were quite happy with where they were. And there was a couple other types of birds there. Glenn got a picture of me here. Unfortunately, just because of the way it was the exposure is going to be very difficult with all the bright light from outside, trying to get somebody on the inside. But
I think the warning here is if you do the trip with Glenn, don't let him take photographs.
You took some good photographs, though. We'll see some of those. This is looking back. This hole that we were just looking out of, you have to walk all these stairs up to here, and you look at this. I'm at the top of the stairs looking back down towards the big entrance where you see the sea lions in the big water area. And so they got this red and green, orange lights, and so it looks a little spooky type of thing. I mean, if it was night, it would be really kind of spooky. But I took a picture back down there, kind of showing you that. And then on the right-hand side, we went back down there, and I took another picture. This time I steadied the camera on the railing a little bit better, and I did a side shot to see if I could get a little bit more depth down that tunnel. But really interesting place. So we come out of it, and then you can go along the side of the cliff to another little observation area, and then you can look down at the beach where they all are kind of coming up on the beach. This place was very noisy. They're barking and fighting. We saw a couple males fighting just for a second. And you notice if you look out in the ocean, the further out in the ocean you get, the cleaner the water is. And I don't know if that's just because the waves are washing up and washing all their poop and stuff out. I don't know. But it was very dirty and turbulent water. We could smell it from up here, so it was probably pretty bad. I zoomed in and got this shot. You can see just how many of them. This is only just a small section of it. There was probably 20 of them in the water, and they would come out and fall back in. And again, a lot more of them here. Now these were stellar sea lions or northern sea lions. They're different than the California sea lions. California sea lions, I guess, were a little bit smaller and different color. But according to the sign there, that these were the stellar ones. And from that vantage point, this is looking back up at the Sea Lion Caves little gift shop. and then over that hill going back down was the lift or elevator that takes you down. Here it is. This tells you about the stellar sea lions, a little bit of information that they had there. And they had a bunch of other signs inside of it. I usually like to take pictures of the signs so I can remember when I'm showing people the pictures what it was all about. And then here's a little place there. So we went just north of that, and we went to this lighthouse. It's named after some Spaniard explorer that went up this far, and then he didn't go much further. There's a lighthouse up here. You take a nice little trail up there. Again, it's not too steep, and it wasn't that difficult to get up there. I think someone was pushing somebody with a wheelchair up the thing, so it wasn't too steep. Nice little trail. It's covered with trees. Looking back towards the parking lot where we parked. By the way, you have to pay at the parking lot, just so you know. It's on the honor system, but you might want to make sure you have a couple bills with you, and small change, not 20s, because everything's less than $20, and they don't give you change. You're supposed to put the money in an envelope, write down your license plate number, and put it in there. And there's a bridge in the background that kind of sees it. Now, this is what's different from California than from Oregon. California, on Highway 1, they didn't build a lot of bridges around areas like this. They would have just diverted the road down the side of the embankment and then back up around the other side, so they wouldn't build bridges. So in California, there's very few bridges. It's a lot windier. I noticed in Oregon, it's a lot straighter because there's a lot more bridges. So that was the difference between Oregon and California that I saw. Walking up, getting close to the house, before we get to the lighthouse, this is one of the picturesque areas. You can see all these wildflowers growing on the side of the thing, and you see the cypress trees. And then here's a picture looking back towards the beach. And this is looking towards that little tip that goes the furthest out right there. That's the Sea Lion Caves. So you saw from Sea Lion Caves looking this way. We're looking back towards that. There's the lighthouse. And then we didn't go through the house, but apparently this is also a bed and breakfast, which I didn't notice that. Glenn, you noticed it, but
yeah,
it's got a working garden in it. I get herbs and stuff like that. Not enough of a garden. There used to be 2 houses here, or 3 houses, I guess. This is the only one that remains. There used to be another house for the 3 different staff members that would staff the lighthouse. Here's just another picture looking back down towards the coast. It's very picturesque, as you can see. And I just got a couple different photos of different views of it. And then here's the lighthouse. Not very tall. Usually when you think of a lighthouse, you're thinking of something that's hundreds of feet high, and this thing's, barely maybe 60 feet high, maybe? I don't know. They take you in and they give you a little tour, but you're not allowed to go up to the top. Well, they said it was closed for repairs or something like that.
Yeah, it didn't seem like a normal lighthouse. It seemed like one of those lighthouses you see at the end of a breakwater.
Yeah, like a little one. And this is the view from up there looking back down. There's not a lot of trees out in this area. I got these old timers here sitting and shooting the breeze, but this is idyllic. I mean, this is the type of thing you want to do when you come to a place like this, is just sit down and take it all in, sort of. We spent a little bit of time here. I know Glenn kind of walked around the house and up that way. I took a lot of photos here, watching the waves roll in, and a lot of people were out at the beach just enjoying the beach. If you look right here, this rock that's up here in the foreground, if you look kind of to the right, but it's kind of a rock by itself, it kind of looks like a sea lion. And then the rock right in front of it to the left kind of looks like a smaller sea lion, and then it gets to the big rocks that are the part of the hills. I thought that was interesting because I thought that those look more like sea lions than anything else that I saw around here. And then here's the picture of the house from the lighthouse, and then looking down the white picket fence. This lady was showing her grandkids around, and they were talking about going up in there. Here's a more close-up picture of the one that I thought looked like a sea lion. The 2 rocks that look like that. And then here's another one with them off to the left-hand side. But you can see this coast is very jagged, but very beautiful. Again, here's the other house. It's a very picturesque house. If it's a bed and breakfast, I don't know what the rates are, how you get into it, but it would have been a beautiful thing to do. And then these great purple flowers. I'm not sure if they're lavender or whatever. I took a few photos of these, trying to get them in focus and have the scenery kind of out of focus, and it came out really, I thought, beautiful. Here's Glenn contemplating, enjoying everything that's around here. Then there's the garden.
I was remember we'd seen that sign that said there were bears around, so I was kind of scanning the forest as such, ignorantly looking for a bear to sort of wave at me or something.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't see any bears, although Glenn wanted to see some bears. So we moved on. We stopped at a little place along the way, Seal Rock. Here's some information about it. It's just a big rock that's out there. We kind of walked down to it. You see the way the rocks here kind of give you like little pools that kind of break all the water. And so in here, this is like an idyllic place to go swimming or kayaking or something like that, because the rough waves are kind of stopped by the rocks. And you can even see here, there's a lot of rocks out here, so they're kind of like soft. There's not going to be a bunch of big waves out here. There's small waves, yes, but the big ones kind of all get broken by these rocks along the way. And here's the big rock that they were talking about. So we walked down there. We kind of walked around it, and this is looking at the back side of it. Sun was kind of right in our face when we were doing it, so it's hard to get a good picture of the rock. And then this is the other side of the rock. And then this picture here is Glenn standing up on a log or whatever, looking up at a rock. And I'm always wondering about all this driftwood that's up here. How much of this driftwood, where did it come from? I mean, they're finding stuff along the coast all the time that are from Japan, from the tsunamis, and people find stuff on our coast all the time. They're finding bottles and cans and docks or whatever that have gone from Japan all the way around here because of the tsunami. I mean, why couldn't trees also come around here? So some of these trees, I don't know where they come from. They could have been anywhere.
Just on this picture, Don, I'm looking up at the rock.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in the top right-hand corner, it looks like a face looking back down at me.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Oh, that's kind of cool.
He looks angry.
Why are you standing on my log? So I walked down to the same place and got kind of a picture looking out over the ocean down there. And then we walked back up, and I got a couple more pictures here. So we continued to drive up the coast from there. It was starting to get late in the day, and before we got here, somewhere around Lincoln, it's either Newport or Lincoln, we stopped and had lunch. And it was a late lunch, like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or somewhere in that time frame. And we stopped, and we stopped at this little, just whatever was along the road. And we go into this restaurant, we sit down, and the bartender, was serving us, and we're sitting there eating it, and I didn't even think anything of it, but they left the kind of like the front door open. And we're sitting there, and a bird flies in, and right by the little entryway, there where you wait to be seated or where you pay your bill, there's a skylight there, and this bird flies in and goes up into the skylight. Well, he flew around a little bit, and then he goes up in the skylight, and we're sitting there like, oh, maybe he has a nest in there. And I was thinking, this is a restaurant. Why do they have wild animals coming in here? That doesn't seem right. Well, what flies around and poops on my food, right? Anyways, so we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I hear this thud, and Glenn looks really quickly. The bird had fallen out of the skylight and just landed on the floor right next to us. and we're like, oh my gosh. And so the guy comes out, the bartender, he comes out and he's walking around, and I said, excuse me, your pet kind of passed out here. And he's like, well, oh, and he comes over and he picks the bird up and takes it off. And he says, oh, I think it just passed out. We're going to give it some water. And then I look at Glenn and I said, so the special for tonight is miniature chicken wings? But anyways, so he tried to nurse it back to health. We don't know whatever happened to the bird, and we just continued on. So getting later in the day, driving up there, we ended up it was like 7 o'clock, I want to say. And this place is open till like 8. We stopped at Tillamook Cheese. So it's a really good place because it's open kind of long hours. It was 8 to 8. So we got there at like 7 o'clock. anyway, so this is a really famous cheese. If you're not from America, you're probably not familiar with it, but in America, this is pretty much a very famous cheese place. It's more like artisan cheese. It's like better than the normal stuff that everybody buys. Really good stuff. So we took a look. Here's Glenn acting like a farmer, and then here's Glenn acting like a cow. Then these little cutouts so you can stick your face through, and took a picture with Glenn here. And then you go up onto this platform, and then you can look down at them making cheese. And actually here what we're looking at is them cutting up the cheese. And my white balance, they had orange lights in there, so my white balance and my camera just didn't work. I couldn't get the right colors. But anyways, you can see the computer screens look normal, but just because of the orange lights, it was kind of weird. I don't know why people would live like that or work in an environment like that. Anyways, we looked at all these different places, and they're chopping up the cheese and then they're wrapping it here. And you pretty much just go into this area of the factory and see there's a factory on the left-hand side where you can see where they're making the cheese, and on this side where they're finishing it up by cutting it all up. So anyways, and then they have this like half of a bus here that you can kind of look at that we looked at. And along Wheeler, I have a couple pictures. This is evening time. It's getting late, and the sun's getting ready to set, but we couldn't really see it. This is Wheeler, and you can see the fog coming in. It's getting late at night. And then we make it to Astoria. This is our third night. So we stopped in Eureka, we stopped in Coos Bay, and now we stopped in Astoria. And we ended up staying right by this bridge at a little Best Western, I think it was. And this was the piece of work of art that they had up on the wall, and I had to take a picture of it because it was really weird. So for dinner, we asked the lady where to go, and she said, just go up the road, and there's a bunch of places. There's a really close place, but they stopped serving dinner at 9 or something like that. So you better get down there because it was like 8:30 or something. So we're like, okay, we're going to go down there real quick. So we get down there, and this is where the hotel was, and to the right is where we experienced karaoke night in the locals. Now this bar, which by the way, it was a great bar, and I had fish and chips again. And I didn't mention this, but when we were at Trees of Mystery for lunch that day, we went across the street, and there was like a Forest Cafe or something like that. I had the fish and chips there, but they had salmon fish and chips. And the salmon fish and chips were they were good, but they weren't what I was expecting, but they were still good. Anyways, so here we had fish and chips again, too, and I was looking at the lab. And this lady's name is Debbie, and she's quite a singer. She really gets into it when she's singing the song. And the funny thing is she doesn't stop smoking or pulling on the handles for the slot machines while she's singing. So, and apparently everybody in the bar kind of knew each other, and it's a little dive thing. It's a local part. It was great. I mean, it was really enjoyable. All the local people just singing, and people that you wouldn't think would sing, they were just singing. Some of them doing a really good job, some of them not doing such a good job.
And I got to learn a hell of a lot about country music.
Yes.
I didn't realize that it was all about wife beating and alcohol. But it was explained to me that is called outlaw country music. That's not what Taylor Swift sings about.
Yeah. And that was a funny thing because Glenn was talking about it, and I was like, well, I listen to country music, and I don't listen to that kind of country music very often, so this is kind of like, weird, because they were just singing all the outlaw songs, I guess, all the ones about, their truck got a flat tire and their dog's dead and their wife's cheating on them and all that stuff. So anyways, it was a good time and a neat place to stop over, and I forgot the name of it, but they had a bunch of like Coast Guard lifesavers and stuff there. Okay, so our trip's about done. On our way back, we're going to Columbia River Falls, and I've seen this picture on the Oregon State Tourism website. Says the 7 Wonders of Oregon, and they show this picture on the website of this really cool gorge with green mossy sides, and it's kind of narrow and kind of quaint, and it's kind of interesting. So I'm looking for this place. This is what I want to find. And I read on the place that says go to this Horsetail Trail, or Horsehead Trail, and so we're looking for it. But as we drive down the road, we end up just seeing Multnomah Falls, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize this is here, so let's go check it out. So we go to Multnomah Falls, and it's just this huge falls, And we're walking up there, and it's obviously the tourist place. Everybody goes there. Now, a lot of people come down here, and they don't go up to this next bridge up here you see on the right-hand side, this upper bridge. And then some people get up to that far, and then they don't go any further. Glenn and I, not knowing how far it was, ended up going all the way to the top. At the top where this river first starts to fall, that's where we went up to. And the trail goes up there. It's a mile long, and it's switchbacks, and it switchbacks 11 times. And they tell you, you're on the third switchback, and I'm like, oh my God, it seems like it's taking forever. So we start walking up there, and you can see the water as it falls. It's just beautiful, and there's a pond up in this area, and the water falls again. So there's like the upper and lower falls type of thing. And here's a picture with me and Glenn here. We took time to picture it. The funny thing is, as soon as we got to Astoria, it was raining that night, and the next day it was kind of just drizzling all day long. All the way out to Columbia River, which was quite a few ways away. Here's the upper bridge that you saw, and everybody's out on that. And then this road that goes up here, this trail, keeps on going up. This is looking down into where the water falls into this little pond area. And here's Glenn taking a picture looking down towards the area where it's falling. And again, beautiful little area. Everything's green and lush, and there's another picture of the falls looking from the where Glenn was standing on the bridge looking over at it. You can see how the water kind of has carved it out underneath, so it's like there's like a little cave back there. Then look from this level, looking out at the Columbia River, which is a huge river, and just you can see how foggy and overcast it is that day. Walking up the trail, there's a little hole in the side of the rock, and so Glenn went and stood in it and took a picture of that. And then looking back on the right-hand side, looking towards Multnomah Falls. And then here's us hiking up it. And this is one of the switchbacks. You just go back and forth 11 times. We finally make it to the top. And here it is at the top, and you're still not to where the falls are. But you're on the top, and you have to go back down a little bit in this little valley that's on the back side of this ridge. And here I am. And even though you can see that the rocks are wet on the top because it's very misty this day. And then we're walking down. You walk down this trail. This ridge to the right is the top of where you had walked up the outer side. You walk down to this, and they have a little platform out here, and you can see this. On the left-hand picture, you see people standing out there. There's a little platform that kind of goes out so you can look over the edge of the falls. And on the right-hand side, this is where you can look out. Now, look, you can't see very far, and you can't really see where the water is falling, but you can see where it starts to go over. So you can't see all the way down. So I kind of tilted my camera a little bit so it's out of whack. It's not like a normal view that you would look. Here's the water falling, and you can see the parking lot way down there, and you can see all the people down there looking up at you. And on the right-hand side all the way, you can kind of see the river. So this kind of gives you a perspective of what you kind of can see from this vantage point. And then just looking straight out from this vantage point, not where the river is, but just looking out from this platform, you can see how large the Columbia River is, and you can see the parking lot that we ended up parking in over there. And I tried to get back as far as I could so I can get where the water's falling, and then looking back out in that same direction. And then if you look back up towards the river, you can see these other areas. And here's Glenn. I don't know what he's doing in this picture. Probably saying who. But I
didn't know what I was doing the whole week.
So he's walking along. You can walk along the side of it. Here's another picture just walking along the side. There's plenty of area. Again, here's mossy covered trees and the water kind of falling down into this little pond before it falls down. And I think this picture is one you took with your phone of me down there, just walking around and almost slipping and falling in the water. The gift shop had this little shirt there, and I thought this was the funniest thing in the world. It says, Multnomah Falls, Oregon, may the forest be with you. I thought it was cute, so I took a picture of it. They didn't have any size for any of my kids or anything, so I didn't buy it. But so we didn't find the place I was looking for, so we decided we were looking at the map trying to figure out where it was, and so we ended up driving up to Cascade Locks, and this is the locks that we saw, and you can walk out on this little island area, and we walked out on there, and this is looking back at this, what did they call this? Bridge of the Gods or something like that. I guess at one point. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, at one point in time, I read the little sign there. An earthquake happened or something, and the sides of the mountains on either side had fallen into the river and kind of made a bridge across, and the Native Americans called it the Bridge of the Gods because, earthquake happened and made a land bridge. Anyways, this bridge replaced that bridge, I guess. And then this is the locks, and you're walking across the locks, and then you get on the island, and I saw some people just sitting there enjoying themselves, maybe having a lunch or something like that. And we look back, and this is all this little island. It's not very big. It's maybe the size of a football field. And here's Glenn. Glenn walked along this water break all the way out to the end, and then at the end you can walk up onto the island, and he walked all the way in. Here's the end of the very point of it where you can look back out at the bridge that goes across here. And so on one side you have Oregon, on the other side you have Washington. So Washington's on the right-hand side, Oregon's on the left-hand side. It gives you perspective on the Columbia River. And here's Glenn standing underneath the bridge. Not really, but and then here's me standing under the bridge. And then again, this is a beautiful place for kayaking or paddleboard or whatever. Not very rapid over here. In the background, on the right-hand side up, you see where it's red and blue. There's train tracks over there, and you can see the trains going there. So anyways, we didn't find it here. So then I looked on the map again, and it says it's like right next to Multnomah Falls, and I'm looking on there, and I can't really tell where to go. So we drive back, and we finally found it. And nowhere on the website do they tell you where it is. And it's probably a good reason because you can get hurt in this area. A couple people got hurt. So it's called Oneonta Gorge or something like that. I'm not sure. Oneonta Gorge. Anyways, it's right. It turns out it's right next to Multnomah Falls. And we ended up going to the Horsehead Trail. We thought maybe that's where we were going to go. We couldn't find any parking, so just by chance we started driving down past this little tunnel to find parking, and then we find where the little gorge area is, and we weren't sure if that was it. So we turn around, we park, and then we walk, and you get to walk through this little tiny tunnel to get to where that is. I guess that used to be the road. And this is the gorge that is the one that everybody's looking for. However, from the road, this is what you see. So it doesn't look like it's the right place. So you got to go down there, and we see all these people walking down there, so we figured this has got to be the place. So we go down there, and here's Glenn. He's trying to keep us dry. It's really nice of him to kind of blaze the trail and kind of find the way around so we don't have to walk through the water. And here we are getting up close to this, and you see all these people out here. This area, this canyon that we're walking into, is filled with all these wet logs that had kind of just fallen into the area. And all these people are trying to get over these logs, and so we're like, okay, let's go find out what they're doing. And so we're trying to stay dry and get over there, and we do so, and we don't get wet. And these people coming off the rock had just come back from there, and they just jump in the water, and they're just walking through, and we're like, wow, they're not even trying to stay dry. Well, guess what? As we get there, I took this picture, and I'm like, oh, this kind of looks like the place. I bet this is it. Look how narrow this gorge is, and see all the green moss that's kind of coming on it. Now, this is summertime, too. I bet in the springtime it's much greener, and it's not as brown or tan, the moss or whatever growing on the side. Anyways, you can kind of see that it's kind of looking like what it is. So I'm thinking, okay, let's get up onto these logs where everybody is, and I can take a picture, and it's probably that's as far as I planned to go at the time. So we get up there, and I get up on top of the logs, and oh my gosh, this is the place. Look at it. I can sort of see it. Well, I'm just going to go to the end of it, and maybe I can get down there and take a good picture. But you look down here, and it kind of looks like it's a jungle in the background, really. And so it's a beautiful place, so we're trying to get over this. So we get over the logs, and guess what?
Also,
go ahead.
You should also emphasize all the people that you see in these pictures and that kind of stuff. They were really struggling to get over the logs. The logs are wet. They're covered in moss in a lot of cases. People are slipping, falling. They're trying to pull their kids over, their dogs over. It was crazy. It was like a rush to get out of a stadium or something like that. It was just nuts, and all of that sort of activity and madness sort of was hiding what was behind those logs.
Yes, and this is what we end up getting into now. At this point in time, some guy had slipped and fallen, hit his head and hurt his shoulder. He didn't want any help, even though his friends were trying to help him get back out of this area. He was wearing slick bottom shoes, like loafers. If you're going to walk on slippery logs, you would not want to wear those type of shoes. Mistake number one. Mistake number two, if you're not prepared for this, probably don't want to do this. You need to have some type of shoe that's grippy or something like this, and you want to be extremely careful because these logs are slippery and they're wet. So you have to be very careful. I'm carrying my very expensive camera there, and I'm trying very hard not to slip and fall. This old guy was trying to bring his German Shepherd along with him, which was a sight because the dog was just like, why am I here? We get to the end of this, and I'm like, oh, my gosh. It looks like I can get around the corner here, and it'll be a perfect picture, and it looks like I'm going to have to get wet, but it's only like 6 inches deep. So we're like, well, we came this far. Let's just do this. All right, I figured I'm just going to get my feet wet. No big deal. I have sandals in the car. We'll be fine. So we get down here, and here's Glenn walking off on the right-hand side, walking into it. And now you can kind of see the gorge. Now, it's misting pretty heavily now, and so my lens is constantly getting wet, and I'm constantly trying to dry it off and trying to hold it down so it's not getting wet and trying to keep my camera from getting wet. It's a very wet day, so it wasn't ideal conditions for taking pictures. So we're walking down here, and as you can see, this gorge is not very wide. But you can see how beautiful and green it is as you get down here, and the water right here is not very deep, so we're thinking, oh great, we can go down here. There's a falls at the end, so we keep on walking. Here's looking back at the logs that are all covering it, and just looking at the gorge, and you can see, other than you see the water spots on the lens, you can see all the green on the side and all this stuff. It's a very beautiful place to go, and walking through some more water. You notice the water goes all the way across, so there's not like a dry land place that you can go around here. But you look above Glenn's head, you can see how high this goes, and it kind of wobbles back and forth as it goes up. So a lot of times you're walking underneath rock, and you can't look straight up and see sky. But you'll notice it's very green and lush, obviously. And we get to this place, and we can see the falls in the background. So I'm like, okay, let's go this way. We're just going to get a little bit wet. Well, where this guy is, right in the middle of this picture, you see him coming out of the water. It's up to his knees. It gets a lot deeper than that as you go through this. We got to this point, and I'm like, what the hell? We got to this point. We're really going to stop. Water goes all the way across, and it's deep. It's about hip deep when you get out here. And you can see these people going through there. They ended up having to pick their kids up when they got to the end because the kids would have been up to their necks. But notice the gorge above and the green and all that stuff going down on it. So we walk through it, and you'll see pictures on our way back, me holding my camera above my head and my cell phone. Again, I wasn't prepared for this. We didn't know that this was the right place. If I was doing this, I would be like these people wearing swimsuits or something because you're going to get wet. So here's the falls that you get to at the end. Again, the pictures I've seen of this gorge is all more green. Again, this was summertime, even though it was wet this time of the year. It's not normally wet. But you can see the waterfall. It's very beautiful and majestic over here. I guess there's a trail that goes up on the top of this that you can see this. To the right, over on the left-hand picture, on the right-hand side, you see a group of people, a little girl and a guy wearing all black. They're talking to their daughter. A rock had fallen off the side and hit her on the head. It must have not have been a very large rock because there was no bleeding or anything like that, and she was fine. She was just crying. But again, on the left-hand picture here, you see this lady in all black. Glenn and I helped her over the logs a couple times. She was there with her boyfriend. Just behind where she was standing, as we're getting ready to leave, a huge rock and I guess a stump of a tree fall into there, large enough that if somebody was under it, would have killed them. So the thing that you learn out of this thing is this is a dangerous place to be, and probably why they don't advertise where it is. The other thing is, too, I think it's because it was all wet. Because all the land was wet. It was kind of rainy and misty, and I think as the water goes through the dirt, it makes rocks loose, and then they fall. So again,
it was a miserable day, but I think that it was also a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like, it's not something you would sort of go, we have to go to whatever this waterfall's called or this gorge is called. It's more a case of we were here and we had to do it. And I think a lot of the people that you saw there felt that way. You can see a lot of people are not prepared for what they're about to encounter. Most people were wearing, running shoes, socks, that kind of stuff, and all of them sudden found themselves waist deep in water and stuff like that. Just like us, I guess.
Yeah, it was just like us. And here's a couple pictures of me and standing behind the falls. And on the left-hand picture, right behind where that lady is standing to my left, or actually to my right on the left on the picture, is where the rock had fallen, just behind her. And then on the right-hand picture here is when we were leaving after that rock had fallen. And from that point on, I was looking up a lot. And I think that's the girl that got hit in the head anyways. Here's part of the deep water that we were going through. Notice Glenn had taken his sweater off and kind of put his cell phone and stuff up higher so that he wasn't getting it wet. Here's me starting to walk into it. And then here's a picture that Glenn had taken. It's when I was waist deep. It's a little bit deeper just behind it because you can kind of see where my shirt was wet. And I'm just holding my camera above my head. Tripping and falling there would not have been a good thing. It would have cost me some serious money. Again, here's another picture, very picturesque of the gorge. Few more pictures here just on our way back. Notice it was misting even harder as we were going back. So the water is cold, and then it's misty out. So like Glenn said, it's a miserable day. And here we are going back over the logs to go back. It was a lot easier to go back. And then when we got past the logs, we were just jumping in the water like everybody else was that we had seen too. So it was kind of like the same thing. And then this is the little bridge that goes you down to there. And I saw the moss kind of growing on it. I thought it looked kind of neat. On our way back from here, just before we got lunch and just before we started heading to Seattle, my check engine light came on in my car. I figured I'd just throw that in on there. Turns out it was like a loose gas cap or something like that. I ended up ordering from Amazon a little plug that I could plug into my computer and plug into the computer on the car, and it would then bring up what the error code was. And then I just got on my cell phone because I didn't have internet service. I checked what it was, and it said it was a vapor leak somewhere, probably your gas cap. So I cleared the code, and it hasn't come back, and it's been a couple weeks. So then we went to Seattle, Washington. I had a couple pictures from there just to show, and then we're done. Just around Seattle. We went and saw our friends. We were there for a conference. We stayed at the Sheraton, and so this little place over here on the right-hand side, I forgot the name of the bar, but it was a bar. We had all of us that were working together kind of went there. Do you remember what the name of it was? The Pine Box. Yeah. Neat
That's
little place. That's
what it was called.
Yeah, it was a neat little place. They had all kinds of beers and stuff like that. Pictures of Seattle. I went down to the market one day. I think we went with my friend James one day, and then I went with somebody else another day. There's a nice little place to have breakfast down there. The market's open on certain days, and if you've ever seen on TV where they throw the fish, this is the place where you go where they throw the fish. And this is where I had breakfast Sunday morning. It's a little like bistro type of place, and you've kind of got like weird things for breakfast. Like you can get kale salad with something for breakfast. Anyways, we went there, me and James, and they have this little wheel that you can go out on. It has little carts in it, and it takes you up so you can kind of see everything. Not as good of a view as the Space Needle is, but still nonetheless another view. Here's some more of the market. I just got a couple pictures I took of it. It's all full of food, and I always go there and get honey because they have a lot of good local honey, fish, and boy, do they have some really good-looking fish and stuff like that. And they have, and some of this stuff they will pack for you and ship. So we've talked about this. Next time we go up there, maybe renting a place where we have a kitchen so that we can go down to the market, get some stuff, and cook our own food. And then we had it in
Michael Corkery actually bought something that they pack specially so that you can take it on the aeroplane.
Oh, really? Okay.
They put enough dry ice in it to last 24 hours or something like that. So that you can actually, because he wanted to take some, I think it was fish or crab back to Boston.
Right.
Which seems weird that you're taking fish and crab back to Boston. I thought that's what they do there.
Well, they have different type of crab, right? So. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So there was a party that we all went to, the attendee party, and this is all of us getting ready to get on the bus to do it, our friends. And then we went to this place, and Glenn, you don't see him here, but he's here. And this place is called the Whiskey Bar. And me and my good friend Neil had gone to this place in the past quite a few times, going to this conference over the years. And the funny thing is, I'm walking with, I think, James coming down here to meet Glenn and Neil. And we're going there, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this isn't the place. This isn't where it is. Well, apparently 3 years ago, they moved the bar up the street or something like that and totally remodeled. And so we hadn't been there for 3 years. And it was like a place that every time I talk to people, I say, oh, every time I go to Seattle, I go to this place. Well, I used to always go there, but apparently for the last 3 years, I had not gone. So it's completely done. And if you want to go there and try any kind of whiskey in the world, I mean, they got the biggest selection. So if you want to go there, and you had one, right? The best whiskey in the world, and it was Australian or something?
I drank something called Sullivan's Cove, the whiskey that won the best whiskey in the world 2 years ago. And then we drank, and so we shared that, and then we had another one called Suntory Yamakasi, which won the best whiskey in the world last year. So wow. Neil and I sat down and drank the best whiskey in the world.
Yeah, and it's you can spend a bit of money here because they got some really good stuff that costs you like $50 a shot and stuff like that. And by the way, if you don't like whiskey and you like rum, there's a place called Rumba, which is just up the street from the hotel that we stayed at. We've gone to there at other events, and it's just down the street from the roastery, the Starbucks roastery. It's like a block down or something from that. So if you like rum instead of whiskey, you can go there. For the party that we were at, we went out to there, and there's my friend James pretending he's the Flash, running past me. And there's the crew of us standing in front of the Super Bowl champion sign, looking like YMCA, I guess. Anyway, and guess what? There's birds in the middle of the middle of the street out there. So that was pretty much the trip up there to Seattle, and some of our pictures from Seattle. I got 2 or 3 pictures from the trip back, but pretty much I went straight down on what's called Highway 5, the straight line that's to the right in California. It's pretty much a boring trip. I was able to drive I left Seattle at about 2:30. From Seattle to Olympia was nothing but backed up traffic. And it took me far longer than it should have to get there, so I was only able to get to right where it says Crescent City, California, where the C is on that, is Grants Pass, Oregon. That's as far as I got. I got there about 11:30 that night. It should only take 10 hours from Washington to my house, according to the map software, if there's no traffic. But with medium traffic, it's supposed to take 12 hours, but it took a lot longer than that because it was just terrible traffic from Seattle. That was Friday at 2 o'clock all the way till like 6 o'clock. It took forever to get to Portland. It was just terrible in Washington. There's a fire going on in southern Oregon, so as I was getting close to this is the next morning after I got to Grants Pass and I was getting up and I'm driving, this is the sun. And it's so thick with smoke. I opened up the window and it smells like there's a big barbecue going on or something. It is so smoky there that you can't even see the sun. And I got a few pictures of the sun here, and it's just surreal because it's just hanging out there in the middle of the sky. It's this orange little dot. I finally pulled over and got a really good picture with my camera, and this is what it looked like. And it was kind of creepy, if you ask me. And then I didn't take any more pictures until I got to California, and I just took it out of my car. This is Mount Shasta, which is one of the biggest mountains in Northern California, and it's the thing to see and all that stuff. So I took a couple pictures of it. And then this is me finally home with my car cleaned after I cleaned it after the long trip. So that's pretty much our trip. The one thing that I did different on the way back, Glenn didn't go back with me. He flew back straight to Australia. But the other trip that I did the first time, when I went back, Rob went back with me, and we went out to Crater Lake in Oregon. Crater Lake's kind of on the east side of Oregon. It's kind of out of the way, but it's a beautiful place to see. And if you go and come back, then you can go two different directions. There's a whole other part of the state of Washington that you can't really see because you're along the coast, or same thing with Oregon. Crater Lake's beautiful. You can go through there and then cut back over to Highway 5. Highway 5 from Mount Shasta south is kind of boring on Highway 5. It's considered Central Valley. So you get out of the foothills and then you go into the Central Valley, and it's pretty much just agricultural land from there all the way to where I live. So, and all the way down to the Grapevine near LA, actually, and it's just all flat and kind of just agricultural land, farms. So it's not very exciting. Anyways, I don't know. Your last thoughts on the trip, Glenn?
Well, like I said, I was just, I was just blown away. It's one of those things. I guess we read about it a lot, and I'm a sort of grew up in the, how can I put it? I guess the 80s and stuff like that, where there used to be a thing called West Coast rock. And we always heard about driving Highway 1, Highway 101, Highway 5, that kind of thing, and you'd be sort of, all the music by the Eagles and things like that. So it's always been in the back of my head that I wanted to sort of see this coast that everybody sort of talks about. And I was blown away once again by the whole thing in general. I know that in some cases I sort of just looked at things and I went, and you do the comparison because, I live in a beautiful part of the world. So you somehow find yourself kind of comparing it to what you know and that kind of stuff. But in retrospect, like some of the stuff that I saw, just the way we went about it as well. And that's the importance of having time, like the fact that we had a little bit of time that we could, because if you think about it, we probably only did 200 miles a day, but we somehow managed to spend 12 hours doing those 200 miles. So we got to see a lot, and we stopped a lot, and we got to sort of breathe it in a lot. We didn't have to rush and things like that. So I was really appreciative of the size, the scenery, the greenery. The size is the important bit, because the pictures don't really convey the size of those rocks that are just lying off the coast. It's very difficult in a picture to just imagine how massive a redwood is. I know that you get a little bit of perspective because I'm standing in front of the tree, but when you stand next to it, that it's that size, that solidity, that the fact that, what it would take to actually move one of these things, to make it fall over and that kind of stuff. I just loved it, like more in retrospect than when I was actually doing it, because I had the chance to sort of chew on it and look at the photos and sort of think about it. I mean, I loved doing it, but now that I'm talking about it and just like reliving it here with you and things like that, it's awesome. I would recommend anybody do it. If I have the opportunity to do it again, I certainly will. And I'm just grateful that I got the opportunity. So thankful to you as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, because doing it by yourself wouldn't be quite as fun.
And I mean, we also did a few things that I think if I was alone or something like that, we probably wouldn't have done. For instance, trekking through water on a wet day to see a waterfall. Things like that. So
that was kind of my fault, because I felt like once we had gotten over the rocks, we were kind of the logs. We were kind of.
Yeah, no. We stood there saying, and you said to me, "I don't think I want to go any further."
But then I
and I remember saying, well, yeah, that's okay, because it was kind of, yeah, like you said, it was a bit of a miserable day and stuff like that. So, I was kind of happy to get back into the warmth of the car. But you know, I wouldn't change it for anything now.
Yeah, no, and you know, part of that too is we had a lot of time in the car and we talked a lot, and I really appreciate, you know, because we exchanged stories back and forth of our families and stuff, and we talked about things like business and stuff like that, as I did with my first trip. But what really stuck with me that I take away from this too is how you talked about appreciation and stuff like that, and I thought that was really good. I enjoyed it, and it kind of gave me a little bit of perspective too, just even being on the trip. Just appreciating nature and all of creation and everything that we got to see and do, and appreciating your company as we went along with this. I think that
sure.
I took that away from this trip as well. So it's not just that I saw everything; it's also getting to know you better, obviously, and
yeah, absolutely, and that was sort of integral to the whole thing as well. I mean, I felt open. We had lots of good conversations. We had good meals. We saw lots of cool things. It was basically, I pretty much felt like I was hanging out with any of my good friends that I've known for years and years and years. It just, if you put two complete strangers together and said, "Oh, you guys are going to have to share a bed tonight," under normal circumstances, you'd kind of go, "Well, yeah, I'll sleep on the couch" or something like that. But that wasn't, right from the get-go. I just thought it went, this just works for me, and I planned to sort of see as much and embrace as much as I could, and I think I did that, and I hope I helped you do that. So.
Oh yeah. Well, anyways, thank you. I'm going to let you get to your Saturday. I didn't realize this was going to take so long.
Oh, no issues with that. You can probably hear the natives getting restless out there. The kids have been running amok all morning, but all good. Appreciate it, and I'm sure I'll catch you again pretty soon somewhere.
All right. Talk to you later.